The G7 summit. I'm joined by Mohan Guruswamy and Rajat Nagar. So many thanks for speaking to us and taking your time out. Mr. Guruswamy, let me first come to you. Do you think the calls to readmit Russia are justified? We did hear Donald Trump saying that the leaders of the world have to come together for us to run the world, and we should have Russia at the negotiating table. Do you believe the calls to get Russia back into the G7 group and again, make it G8 are justified at this point of time?
No, I think it's a good move by Trump because you can't run Europe without Russia in the bloc, because Russia is the source of all energy supplies to Germany and to Poland and all you guys, and it's a big economy and it's a powerful country, and so Europe is incomplete. And remember, this is essentially a white man's club. Europe and in America, there are no other people. They're not talking about membership for China and the others. So if they have to have a white man's talk, then Russia becomes an integral part of that. And frankly, I think Putin would like the prestige and exposure, but I don't think there's any great loss for Russia right now, whether it's in G7 or whether it's G8. But it's a good call. And I think, it goes a long way in pacifying relationships. Crimea is a fait accompli. You can't do anything about it. And so you just got to live with it.
Mr. Guruswamy, stay on with me. Let me also pose a question to Rajat Nagar. Rajat Nagar, with the world leaders divided on the issue, while Mr. Guruswamy is saying that it is a good call to get Russia back into the club, do you think the call to get Russia back, accompanied with the recent worries on trade war, could deepen the wedge between US and the world?
I think that's probably the fundamental issue. I see, and I don't want to be over dramatic, but I see a fundamental tussle here of values: multilateralism versus unilateralism, beyond borders, within borders. And President Trump essentially rejects a multilateral view. He sees the world through the prism of unipolarity, with U.S. being at the center and make America great again, etc. I personally think that his call for getting Russia in was probably just impromptu. I don't think they've actually gone through a policy discussion whether it should or shouldn't, because one has to think through why Russia was sort of removed in the first place. But I agree with Mr. Guruswamy that this is a club, and this club membership depends on all the other members. So I think the issue that we should focus on is not whether Mr. Trump is right in asking for Russia to be brought back or not, which the rest of the G7 members have rejected outright, but it's really more a question of where is the world headed. And I'm afraid the world is headed to a U.S. versus the rest. And I think we should probably also discuss really the discussions which are happening across the globe in Qingdao, the Shanghai Cooperation Dialogue, which is a gathering where multilateralism is the focus, not unilateralism that Mr. Trump is talking about.
Absolutely. That's a very valid point, Mr. Nag, that you've raised. And let me go back to Mr. Guruswamy. Mr. Guruswamy, even Donald Tusk added that G7 has faced enough obstacles in their quest for unified positions, whether it was trade, whether it was terror being some of them. Do you believe that this could add to further diplomatic chaos?
One must realize that the United States is the country with the world's biggest trade deficits. It has trade deficits with 72 countries. The first foremost being China. It has a trade deficit of $60 billion with India. And it has a trade deficit with all these other G7 countries. And that confidence in the dollar and that desire to accumulate dollars and keep your money in dollars in American banks or wherever is America's strength. Without America's trade deficit, unfortunately, we'll all be in bad trouble. So therefore, the United States has a centrality in this, 24% of the world's GDP, and has a central role in running the world's economy. It's unfortunate that there's a man like Donald Trump there, but that is the essential reality. And you've got to live with that. You can't say that, you keep piling on your deficits and we'll keep selling goods to you, take your money, and let the world run like this. I think sooner or later we'll have to get down to getting back to what Lord Keynes and others thought in Bretton Woods of balanced trade, making countries do balanced trade. So I think, that time will come and there's probably another clash. But this system we've got now is in difficulty.
Absolutely. In fact, Mr. Nag, the EU leaders are not only seething about Trump's tariffs, but are also annoyed about his decision to pull out of the Iran deal, which could result in European businesses being hit with secondary sanctions. Add to that backing out of the climate deal and then the NATO fiasco as well last year. Can one say that, we're perhaps on the brink of most strained G7 relationship in the recent times?
I think that would be a fair characterization. I just hope that the fracture is not sort of, long-term or permanent, but certainly it's a very divided alliance. As a matter of fact, Mr. Trump seems to be more keen on dealing with others who were not part of the alliance. And I think what one needs to think through is a vision of the world where cooperation is very important, multilateralism is very important. I agree with Mr. Guruswamy about the trade imbalances, but there are ways to deal with it, and you deal with it through rules-based institutions, WTO, and also why is there a trade deficit, which the Americans are talking about. So, but you don't go about doing it by wrecking the alliance. You don't go about doing it by pulling out of international agreements and not putting something in its place. As a matter of fact, Mr. Trump pulling out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, is a boon to China and the RCEP, which is being talked about, of which India will be a part. So I think we are seeing a very incoherent set of issues coming to the table, which are not based on cooperation, which are not based on a sort of multilateral framework, and that's what worries me. These immediate storms will pass, but are we damaging a system of alliances, of which Asia, of course, has to be a very important part? That's why I keep bringing in the Shanghai Cooperation
Absolutely,
dialogue,
and Asia will...
an important one.
Absolutely. In fact, let me, go back to Mr. Guruswamy. Mr. Guruswamy, that's a very valid point that has been raised by Mr. Nag, that in the long term, we are actually ruining the system. India is also in favor of multilateralism. We will be making our debut at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Prime Minister Modi is there. He is also slated to meet the Chinese President Xi Jinping on the sidelines and take stock of the implementation of the decisions that have been taken a month ago at Wuhan. Do you expect any breakthrough there, and do you believe India and China put together can probably drill some sense into the world and see how things will move on from here?
I don't think so. I don't think India is really in that game now. India is kind of living day to day, trying to fend off immediate crises. I don't think Prime Minister Modi and President Xi are going to talk very much about this. We are still concerned with Dokulam and all these other things there. So I think the bilateral between those two would be on that, and the trade deficit we have with China, and get China's investment. So we've got to clear the decks within our own system to get Chinese money into India and keep them invested in India and interested in India. Because that is the only country now in the world with large sovereign funds. And sovereign funds is what we need in infrastructure and railways and all these things. So I think, Modi will be discussing that more than, the world financial architecture. I think that is beyond our abilities in the Ministry of Finance and, in the PMO, so they won't discuss that.
Absolutely. We have our own problems to deal with. But on that note, Mohan Guruswamy and Rajat Nag, many thanks for taking your time out and speaking to us on that issue. G7 meeting happening, also the SCO meeting. Lots of stuff is happening. Let's see where the world really heads. And, at a time when we are talking about multilateralism, how will US's policies and what they're saying is going to impact the world.